Welcome to 69X Minutes. I'm Erin Molan. It's great to have your company. Thank you so much for joining us. We are the media, but without the filters, the fluff and the BS we've been fed for decades. Just the biggest headlines, the boldest investigations, and the wildest stories straight from the X trenches. It's real news, real fast, so let's get stuck in. Tonight, a Russian soldier speaks from the front lines, and a journalist in Ukraine reports from the ruins. Two sides of a war that's reshaping the world. What's real, what's not, and what's being kept from you. Have you ever heard of the Silicon Valley of Argentina? Well, we met up with their delegation to talk tech and the future in this booming city. A former Mossad agent reveals a discovery so big it could shift alliances and rewrite the next chapter of history. Kid Rock, yes, he joins Eric Boiling to talk derangement syndromes. No doubt Trump features prominently. And a young AI startup called Perplexity is challenging Google's stranglehold on search. Is this the dawn of real unbiased search, or is this the next step further into the uncanny valley, where reality and digital are blurred forever? And in my take, the mainstream media designates terrorists as sources of reliable news. Absolutely crazy. This, though, is not. No spin, no scripts, just the world as it really is. This is 69X Minutes. The JFK files have dropped, but what was really inside them? For decades, the government kept key records locked away. Now, with new documents finally unsealed, do we have the answers or just more questions? Joining us is Mike Benz, breaking down what's inside, what's missing, and what it all means.
Many of the same institutions that are being penetrated by the CIA in these files are alive and well today and playing a major role in politics today, which gets to the question of, if the CIA had penetrated them that deeply back in the 1960s, how deeply are they still penetrated today? So when you see the CIA's penetration of teachers and the teaching profession and the teachers' unions, there's one document that goes through the World Confederation of Organizations of the Teaching Profession, and how the CIA had created front companies and shell groups in order to influence all the different teachers' unions. These are the largest teachers' unions in the United States today, and we know that, of course, based on these files, that their entire senior leadership was CIA 60 years ago. They, too, are trying to stop Trump's shutdown of the Department of Education and are on the front lines organizing protests at the Department of Education building. It was JFK who really fully transitioned the U.S. into a so-called small wars model, which is this idea that the U.S. has to transition from thinking about its special operations in terms of tanks and fighter jets, but really thinking of it in terms of paramilitaries and control over local governments and control over the local indigenous populations in places that we operate to get the support of the local population. The USAID can get into areas that the State Department can't because it's not formal U.S. diplomacy. It's simply a humanitarian group. It also operates through multiple layers of NGOs that themselves don't represent themselves as government agents. And so they have more credibility with the local populations. There's much less oversight, so they can fund dirty actors. For example, if a local warlord is in control of the territory or a narco gang is in charge of the territory, it might be a diplomatic incident to give them a State Department grant, because that's formal U.S. diplomacy rewarding and directly financing drug networks, people committing genocide. But if USAID is doing it as a distribution of humanitarian funds to the local population, and they just happen to be the senior leaders over those local populations, then USAID can get away with it. And so that gets them on our payroll and establishes that favors for favors relationship, that if they want to keep getting the money, they'll do what USAID wants. And so they will follow the policy set forth by USAID, even if that's not the policy being recommended by the U.S. State Department. The problem with USAID is not that it has the power to do what it does, but that it has the power to do what it does without State Department approval, without White House approval, that they can fool the White House by simply not reporting what they're doing. In this document, the CIA sets out how they believed at the time, after the failure of the Bay of Pigs, that there was no direct, immediate way to overthrow Castro in Cuba, and that was what was required instead was a massive commitment from Congress in terms of money and manpower beyond these special operations being done in the form of Bay of Pigs. But the CIA was frustrated that that political will from Congress did not exist. What they're saying here is, since we can't get Congress to take the action we want them to, we don't have the authority because the American people are not voting for what we really want to do. The other option we have is to just do mass immigration of these exile communities of immigrants and refugees. And over time, if we give unlimited support to these exile groups, they will form enough of a lobby on themselves to affect the internal politics of Congress, with importing tens of thousands of Somalians into Minneapolis, Minnesota. Lo and behold, that produces a congresswoman like Ilhan Omar, who then goes and advocates on behalf of the Obama foreign policy for Somalia and Eritrea and Kenya and the whole region. Seeing that in writing from the Cloak and Dagger Central Intelligence Agency 60 years ago, and that we're dealing with the same issue right now as we take on the immigration issue, really is a sort of back to the future moment.
Dr. Kirk Moore took a stand. He refused to comply with COVID mandates, and now he's facing decades in prison. His case has sparked outrage. Was he upholding medical freedom or breaking the law? Is this about justice or control? Dr. Moore shares his side of the story.
We're just on the heels of a major pandemic, a lot of controversy with the way we treated that. And I was hoping we could talk a little bit about your background, how you got involved in administering vaccines. I'll let you tell us about it.
In 2020, I started treating people for COVID. Nobody else was treating them. We had a lockdown here in Utah for about 5 or 6 weeks and people getting sick. And so they just didn't have anywhere to go. And so through word of mouth, they found out about me. So I started treating people with kind of the protocol that was, out at the time, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, everything else. The biggest thing for me was the treatment. We don't have treatment for anybody. We got to wait till you're almost dead, when you're blue in the face and you can't even get to the hospital and you have to call an ambulance. Then that's the time you need to call us. There's nothing else in medicine that we wait until the final days of somebody's life before we intervene and treat somebody.
A vaccine comes out and people are like, this isn't a vaccine. This isn't even a treatment. What is it?
It was a psyop on humanity. When you get somebody to do what it is that you're asking them to do, 90% of those people will then take the next step. And you get 90% of people in the United States to wear a mask. 90% of those people will then in turn do whatever is the next step that you're telling them to do. And that next step was the vaccine. A coronavirus that we've known has been part of our milieu for, hundreds, thousands of years. We haven't been able to do it, but all of a sudden in 9 months, we're going to come up with a vaccine that's going to solve a common coronavirus. All the animals died and all the mRNA studies that they did. Now you can't even pull them up anymore. I didn't, bookmark them, but you can't find them anymore. And history is going to look back on this and look at Anthony Fauci as the single worst kind of mass genocide physician ever in the history of mankind. I thought that we were going to get to the point where when people died around them, their eyes would open up. The problem with that is these people are so brainwashed that they still listen to the experts, and the experts are baffled about what's happening.
There's been some allegations saying that you sold fake COVID vaccine cards while destroying doses of the vaccine. What's been your experience with the way the investigation has been handled by federal prosecutors?
The vaccines were given to me for free. You come to me and you ask me, hey, with my history, with my medications, with my medical problems, what is your best recommendation for me and what should I do? Based upon all the data that I have, all the information that you give me, I come up with a plan and then you and I agree on it. That's informed consent. And so that's exactly what I did with every single one of my patients.
Has this attention impacted your career at all, your life at all? Or
My thing here says plastic surgery, right? I'm supposed to be full of money and driving expensive cars, going on expensive vacations. And, I'm broke. It's not that I've lost my patient database. My patients still come to me. But with all the other expenses that I've had, the time that I've spent in jail and lost revenue on that. So it's significantly impacted, my practice. I still have a license. The federal government doesn't have a licensing issue. They can't control my license. But if I were to get convicted, then I would probably lose my medical license. To this day, colleagues of mine, plastic surgery friends of mine, physically maimed from this injection. And nobody's going after any of those people. Nothing probably will happen to them. And yet here, where I have no patient complaints, nobody turned me in saying, hey, this guy is giving fake vaccines, you need to go after him. And the federal government decides on their own that they are going to come after me for $28,800 in fraud. 4 people that were indicted. 2 of us decided to try to challenge the jurisdiction of the federal government against us. They put me in jail and they didn't touch the other person. I was in jail for 12 days. I, quote unquote, barely got out according to the transcript, and my magistrate judge says, you barely meet the criteria for me to, relook at your case and allow you to come out with some different restrictions. In November of 24, I got thrown back in jail for another 22 days. And there were 2 of us that did the exact same thing that was supposedly against the rules. We texted each other saying, hey, we have a hearing tomorrow. It'd be nice to make sure that you and your attorneys are there because we have an opportunity to get the case dismissed. So I got thrown in jail along with Chris Anderson. They wanted to keep me in jail for 9 months pending trial because I had shown that I was, incapable of following my pretrial release restrictions. And the pretrial release restrictions that I specifically violated were talking about the case. So I guess talking about the case even means texting somebody saying, hey, you should come to a hearing tomorrow.
why do you think it is that the medical profession is so much focus of scrutiny in this COVID world?
We failed humanity, and we failed in our ability to take care of our patients. And anybody who injected any patient of theirs without knowing what was in the injection, because we didn't know then and we don't know now. We do not have a list of ingredients. We do not know what it is. We do not have any long-term studies. Everything's always been tested against either a prior vaccine or a concoction that they call a placebo, which is just all of the additives that they put in except for the antigen that they're trying to inject you with. And the whole vaccine system needs to be blown up and thrown away and start over. I am so disillusioned and disconcerted with our profession right now that I have really no desire to continue down this road. I think I'll always be somebody that speaks out against misinformation, disinformation, and I will do everything that I can to educate myself on all the other aspects of medicine that don't involve plastic surgery that I think are crucial right now. We have billions of patients out there that are going to suffer complications and consequences from this bioweapon. My biggest takeaway from this whole thing is do not comply. Do your own research, educate yourself. Don't trust what anybody tells you, and nobody out there has your best interest at heart. You might think that the government is looking out for you. They're not.
Here in Argentina, while President Milei keeps making it great again, socialist Buenos Aires governor Axel Kicillof keeps making his province worse again. After the flooding of Bahia Blanca City, Kicillof's district, after President Milei sent the defense ministry and allocate more than $200 million in direct aid, after Elon Musk himself helped out providing free internet access, 16 people died. More than 1,400 were evacuated. Experts identified deficiencies in urban planning as one of the determining factors. However, take a listen to Kicillof's statement and remember, he's been governing the province for 5 years now.
20 obras vinculadas con el problema estructural del agua en Bahía. De toda la historia de Bahía no se encararon porque las obras que tienen que ver con el agua son caras, llevan mucho tiempo y a veces además generan mucho inconveniente porque hay que romper veredas. Y para cuando decidan el voto también, si alguien de Milei hubiera ganado en la provincia de Buenos Aires, esto estaría parado, igual que lo del Cholo.
This is Argentina's Milei News, and that's your 69 seconds for 69 minutes.
Kid Rock says what he thinks, doesn't he just? No filter, no apologies. He's been cancelled, banned and demonetised, but he's still standing, louder than ever. With Eric Bolling, he takes on a new crop of derangement syndromes, including EDS, Elon derangement syndrome, cancel culture, free speech, and why he refuses to bow to the mob.
All right, let's bring in a good friend of mine, also an international rock star, superstar, celebrity, friend of Trump, personal golf buddy of Trump, and Elon Musk friend, Kid Rock. Kid, welcome to 69 Minutes. Trump plus Elon, we haven't talked in a long time on tape. Trump plus Elon, how does a wealthy New York billionaire president, 78 years old, end up becoming bros with Elon Musk, a younger tech guru bro, and then celebrities and rock stars like you? How did he get the whole world behind him, Kid Rock?
Man, I think Elon just got on board because he wanted to help his country. He saw the the waste and the crap. I mean, what were you going to do? What were your choices? To go for the Democratic Party, and their disarray that they've been in with Kamala Harris. Trump's proven himself the first 4 years to be the smartest guy in the room, hands down. And he's a lot of fun beyond that. So, I just think it makes sense. Somebody wanted to help their government, didn't want to get paid for it, wanted to help their country. So, of course, he's going to come in. I got to know Trump early on in his administration, was a big supporter from when he came down the escalator. And, he's done nothing but prove me right.
Kid, how do you feel? I think Bannon calls people like you and I, original gangster MAGA crew. How do you feel about the newbies? How do you feel about Bezos coming on board, or Mark Zuckerberg coming on board, or that lunatic Lindy Lee, who used to be a Kamala Harris advisor, supporter, senior aide, all of a sudden saying, I didn't really like them. Now I'm pro-Trump. I know we want the bigger party, we want everyone on board, but I feel a little offended by it. How about you?
I think they got to prove themselves. That's the bottom line. They got to, you can come in and, people call it kiss the ring or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's kind of, sleep with one eye open with them and, let them prove, what they believe in and who they support and what policies they get behind. And, if they want to keep, speaking of, meta and all that, if they want to keep, what do they call it? Shadow boxing or shadow banning people like me and Joe Rogan and, certain outspoken people, I'm sure yourself. So, I just say sleep with one eye open, but welcome aboard. But, what was it? Trust but verify.
Trust but verify. Ronald Reagan also, beware the Trojan horse. I agree with that one, Kid. So Trump tends to kind of piss off the rest of the world. Let's be honest. Gulf of America, what a great idea. It's so logical, made so much sense. Gulf of America, Greenland, Canada, 51st state. This one created a bit of an international incident, I think. So there's a guy named Raphael Glucksmann. He's an MEP, which is a member of European Parliament, who said, we want our Statue of Liberty back. We're from France. We want our Statue of Liberty back. Listen to Caroline Levitt's response to that.
So is President Trump going to send the Statue of Liberty back to France?
Absolutely not. And my advice to that unnamed low-level French politician would be to remind them that it's only because of the United States of America that the French are not speaking German right now. So they should be very grateful to our great country.
What's Kid Rock's response to the French?
Boom, mic drop. Mic drop. That young lady is something else. She is a boss. Yeah. She is a boss. If they really want it back, I'd say just let's weld a big gold middle finger on it and send it back.
I was thinking someone could make one of those memes of the helicopter picking up the Statue of Liberty and like bang it, clang it around the Eiffel Tower and drop it back. You really want it? Take it. It's yours.
I think we got to remember. When these, like she said, these low-level, no-name politicians come in and say this stuff, we shouldn't let it divide us from there's. I know several French people who run companies over there in Paris and stuff, and are good friends with them. They are huge Trump fans, huge, the pro-America agenda, and they wish they had more of that in their country. So, we got to remember there's still good people in these countries, even though you got these knucklehead left-wing lunatic politicians always, spewing off this crazy stuff. So we got to remember we got some good people over there, but yeah, France has got to definitely turn around some of their country.
Yeah, and how many Canadians do we have right here in America who will come up to me and say, 51st state, not a bad idea. A lot of Canadians would actually enjoy being part of the United States.
I think so. I mean, I know, we're actually on our Rock the Country tour taking Nickelback's headlining the Friday night with us. And I remember them telling me years ago, I was asking them about, socialized medicine. And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but they, at the time, it was like, they were not, and I've talked to plenty of other Canadians. I mean, I'm from Detroit. We're, the only place in America where you can drive south to Canada. So, we spent a lot of time there as kids, and especially touring, doing other things. And there's some great people in Canada. I'd say the majority when you get outside, like,
Yeah, but kid, what about these Canadian this Canadian knucklehead, one of those Parliament people who said we're going to shut off electricity, power, and gas service to people in Detroit and in America if you don't stop with the tariff things? What's your message to them?
Good luck defending yourself if something bad goes down.
Yeah. We are fortunate. And they're lucky, just the proximity to the United States.
I mean, they're basically going to try the bigger penis game with Trump, and they're not going to win.
I have no background to comment on whether that's an accurate or not accurate statement.
Metaphor, Eric. It's a metaphor.
I digress. Rock, appreciate your time. Very, very busy man. I know you're in your rehearsals for your upcoming tours, and appreciate you making a few minutes for bowling and 69 minutes. Thank you so much, Kid Rock.
Thanks, Eric. You're the man.
See you soon.
It's the kind of interview that almost never happens. A frontline Russian soldier speaking openly from inside the war. Dmitry Simez Jr. from New Rules podcast sits down with Ivan, a motor rifle platoon commander in the Russian army, for a rare look inside the devastation, the combat, and the reality of life on the front lines. Raw, unfiltered, straight from the battlefield. You won't hear this anywhere else.
FPV drones are frightening in that they keep you on edge all the time. You can't relax, you can't step out for a smoke during the day because something could come zooming in at any moment. You hear a buzzing sound and that's it. It's not just that you might not have time to hide. If you hear the sound of cluster munitions, bam, 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 you most likely won't be able to escape because of UAVs. They fly 24/7. They fly, they see, they have thermal imagers, night vision, satellite photos. We also have satellite photos. We have drones flying. We see each other from 20, 25 kilometers. We see what's going on with us and where we are. There's a moment in the day from 4 to 6 in the morning when it's hard for a night bird with a thermal imager to see anything. And with an ordinary camera, it's still bad. So it's only twilight. And during that twilight, you can move around somehow. Usually all logistics movement happens from 4 to 6 until no bird has flown, not even one. And it works that way for both them and us. We know this, but we can't do anything about it because we simply can't see each other. Infantry moves like that, and the assault troops begin the assault. If we had bombed it every day, we could have already been storming Zaporozhye, but we can't.
Because of the political decision that Russia won't bomb.
Political, humanitarian, and universal human considerations. After all, we came to fight the regime, not the people. I fully support this stance, and so do most of my friends, that we came to fight against the Zelensky regime, his neo-Nazis, and the Ukrainian nationalists who harbor a deep-seated hatred against us, Russia, as a nation. We are fighting against them, not the general population. In fact, many cities in Zaporozhye, where I've been, show considerable support for the changes occurring because they are now part of Russia. They would come out from the other side of our positions. That is, they'd go through the first trenches and start advancing in the rear, and we would give up and retreat. That's what they thought. If you look at the situation, it's exactly like Kharkov. They gathered in the same columns and went. They thought they'd get out with the Bradleys, drive through with the Hummers, and shoot at the bushes. And we would say, oh no, it's American equipment, we've got to surrender. And that's the main failure. They completely overlooked that the Russian army, as it turns out, can adapt, improve, and all that. They believed that they were the good guys, and we, the Russians, were the bad orcs who don't learn anything and can only lose. They believed it themselves. They made it up and believed in it. I ran into a Pole once, specifically a Pole, and we encountered some Cubans. They're not Western, they were Colombians. I almost mistook them for Cubans, our brothers. They were Colombians. Colombians are quite dangerous guys. Well, they are battle-hardened since they're always in combat in their neck of the woods, so they shoot well. So yes, these mercenaries turned out to be dangerous. And the funniest thing is, sometimes these Colombians serve as human shields for cover. There have been cases when we arrive at positions and 2 Colombians lying dead there with gunshot wounds to their heads. No way. How did that happen? We didn't shoot? No one did. So I think these conjectures are likely true. Perhaps they were shot by their own Ukrainian comrades to ensure a calm retreat. They had this notion that if they attacked conscripts and captured a couple of cities, Russia would be scared and everyone would run away. I don't know why. They seem to have conjured up these hypothetical conditions for themselves and took that as gospel. They didn't invest enough into this attack. They didn't bring in sufficient forces. They thought it would go well. Why didn't they know that on the Kursk front, near Kursk, near Belgorod, there was a whole grouping from Battle Group Sever, a whole grouping where people are in every grove? Didn't they know about this? I don't know how it happened. Maybe the US is still not providing satellite images of Russia. So they tried, failed, and just clung to it with all their might. My division's 30th Regiment fought them every day. For show, the Ukrainians wanted a reason to say, look, we've invaded Russia, as a counterpoint to the Russian army's successes in Donbass, the LPR, and even Zaporozhye. They wanted to pat themselves on the back and claim, but look, we still have Suja. That's the crux of the matter. Why didn't they succeed? Because our Russian command didn't fall for this provocation. They didn't go and pull everything toward Kursk to retake it as quickly as possible. Not Kursk itself, but the Kursk front. They didn't fall for it. They just worked methodically, quietly, bit by bit, squeezing the enemy. Politically, they don't understand us. I can't comprehend this, honestly. Like, we've lived next to each other as brothers. We were one country for a long time. It's a deep-rooted history. Well, we've basically been one people throughout history. So Ukraine and Russia are single totality, and yet they don't understand us. It feels like they're not planning these operations, but someone in the West, in the Pentagon is. Because how do they not understand us and that we're not going anywhere, we're not going to run, we're not going to fall for provocations? It's odd. Each time one of their big operations, it feels like the Americans are planning their offensive in Iraq. That's the feeling. Discipline is always a tricky thing. You have to sit in the barracks, get to know each other for a long time, and then there will be some discipline. You have to stay in barracks mode with the group, all that. But in every other aspect, command, tactics, and technological support, it has improved a lot. And don't look at the fact that they're walking around in Chinese helmets. They've got more equipment on their backs than the entire command post had in 2022. They've got 6 radios, cables with satellites, Starlink and Gazprom's satellite internet.
You said Starlink?
Of course.
But wait.
We only use it to watch pornography, don't worry. We don't use it for military purposes. It doesn't block us. I hope the Americans will understand in these negotiations that it's not them who are like, we've finished everything with peace, but simply, we defeated you. NATO, Americans, we defeated you. And what Donald Trump says, he's just subtly admitting that America lost this war. That's it. I want to say this because it's true. You gave Ukrainians everything you could, trained them how to act, but nothing worked. And Russia achieved everything it wanted and continues to achieve.
For over 2 years, Joe Lindsley reported daily from Ukraine, bringing the war to life for Chicago radio listeners. Now he's going deeper, beyond the headlines, beyond the front lines, to the raw reality of living under relentless Russian bombardment. What does it mean to wake up every day to air raid sirens, to build a life in the shadow of war, to resist even when the world stops watching? From behind the lines, Joe shares with us the truth of life in Ukraine, of survival, defiance, and the real cost of this war.
Hello from Kyiv. I am the one independent American voice who's been reporting from Ukraine every single weekday since 2022. Previously, I was a war correspondent on Chicago's WGN radio. And after 3 years of witnessing the Biden administration's strange restrictions upon Ukraine, I started to wonder if I was missing something. And so when Trump returned to office, key pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, from Burisma to the Steele dossier. President Trump, among other things, is right now questioning Joe Biden's pardons. And one of those pardons was for Hunter Biden. Curiously, it dates back to 2014, the exact year Hunter was hired by a company called Burisma. Now, everyone talks about Burisma, but after reporting here on the ground in Ukraine, I've realized that nearly everyone gets one key detail wrong, a detail that might flip your entire understanding of the situation here in Ukraine. Many Americans, rightly frustrated with the Washington elite and the war machine, assume that any support,
as long as it takes,
that Joe Biden gave to Ukraine was tied to money his son made from Burisma. But the real story? Burisma was a Russian front to control Ukraine. Let's take a look. Burisma was an oil and gas company co-founded and run by Mykola Zlochevsky, an oligarch who was Ukraine's Minister of Ecology from 2010 to 2012. So he was regulating the very industry from which he profited. And then from 2012 until Ukraine's 2014 revolution, Zlochevsky, while still CEO of Burisma, was Deputy Secretary of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council. In other words, he was a member of the Yanukovych cabinet. In 2014, Ukrainians, after centuries under Moscow's yoke, refused to leave the streets, rejecting a deal pushed by both the European Union and by the Obama administration that would have kept the Kremlin-backed leader Yanukovych in power. The Ukrainian people said no, and so President Yanukovych fled the country, his cabinet collapsed, and the Ukrainian parliament voted to remove Yanukovych. Burisma's CEO, Zlochevsky, fled, along with the rest of the Yanukovych cabinet, to Russia. The protest had turned into a revolution. The Ottawa truckers times 1,000 at least. In the days and weeks following Ukraine's 2014 revolution, the Soviet-era state institutions were abandoned. This was the dream of what we see right now in America with DOJ. Berkut police had vanished. Even the national police had disappeared. And for a brief moment, the people were truly in charge. But into this power vacuum, the Kremlin moved quickly to gain control. And it seems Moscow found a nice insurance policy in the person of the son of the sitting United States vice president. And here's where we get to one of the bombshells. In 2023, Hunter Biden's former business partner, Devin Archer, testified before the United States Congress that in March 2014, at the same time that Putin was seizing Crimea from Ukraine, fugitive CEO Mykola Zlochevsky of Burisma was in Moscow meeting with Devin Archer. So the CEO of Burisma in March 2014 was in Moscow meeting with Hunter Biden's business partner. Weeks after Ukraine's revolution and right as Putin was taking the Crimean Peninsula from Ukraine. Weeks later, as the New York Times would later confirm in reporting in May of 2019, Hunter Biden joined Burisma's payroll at more than $50,000 per month. But this was not a deal with Kyiv. It was a deal with people in Moscow. To recap, just weeks after Ukraine's revolution, one of the oligarchs who had lost power to the people in Ukraine started paying the son of the United States Vice President Joe Biden. That same Vice President Biden was overseeing Ukraine policy for President Obama. And Biden in 2014 did nothing to help Ukraine fight back against Russia's invasion.
When the Ukrainians came here 2 weeks ago, they went to the Pentagon, they asked for weapons. And we said no, but we offered them MREs, rations, baguettes.
So was the fugitive CEO of Burisma hoping to influence Joe Biden in order to help restore a pro-Kremlin regime in Kyiv? Fast forward to 2024, and in the waning days of his presidency, Joe Biden gave a pardon to his son Hunter, dating back to 2014. Now, why reach back to that particular year unless there was something to erase about Burisma and the deal that Hunter made with people in Moscow? Hours after Putin and Trump spoke last Tuesday, the air raid sirens screamed across Kyiv as Russia launched yet another one of its intense drone attacks. A day later, on Wednesday, March 19th, Trump spoke with President Zelensky, and not long after that phone call, Russia bombed a central Ukrainian city, while Ukraine also struck back at Russia's Ingles Air Force Base with its own drones. At the same time, wildfires were raging near Odessa. Putin rejected the 30-day ceasefire that Ukraine and the U.S. had tentatively agreed to, Instead, he offered two different ceasefires, one on energy infrastructure and another in the Black Sea. But here's the catch. Those two ceasefires are in areas where Russia is actually already weak and already losing. Since 2023, Ukrainian sea drones have crippled Russia's Black Sea fleet, allowing Ukraine to export more grain than it did when you had the United Nations brokered deal. And so right now, there is actually a de facto ceasefire in the Black Sea because it has been pacified. Meanwhile, Russia's attempts to plunge Ukraine into darkness this winter have failed. It's now springtime here in Kyiv. This is Joe Lindsley reporting from Kyiv, Ukraine.
Hello and welcome back to your weekly crypto update on 69X. Bitcoin's price took a hit this week, dropping 1.6% to $83,132. That's a 31% slide from its mid-January peak as investor optimism fades amid economic uncertainty and tariff concerns. President Donald Trump vowed to make the US the undisputed Bitcoin superpower and crypto capital of the world. Speaking at a digital asset summit, he promised to remove regulatory barriers and called on Congress to clarify rules for stablecoins and market structures. In legal news, the SEC dropped its 4-year-long case against Ripple. The suit, which began in 2020, accused Ripple of raising over $1 billion through unregistered XRP sales. XRP jumped 8% after that announcement. Meanwhile, MicroStrategy's stock fell 6.8% after Bitcoin's dip. Still, the company bought another 130 Bitcoin for $11 million, doubling down amid the volatility. And finally, investor Kevin O'Leary says crypto is moving out of its cowboy era. He believes stronger regulations are bringing digital assets into the mainstream as both a payment method and investment tool. And that's it for this week's recap on 69X. I'm Adele, the host. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Mossad moves in the shadows, but its impact is felt across the world. Israel's elite intelligence agency has uncovered something big, a secret with the power to either shift alliances, ignite conflicts, or change the course of history. Maybe all three. Who's involved? What's the real threat? And how far will they go to keep it hidden? Visegrad investigates. Here's a sneak peek of their story.
The Israeli state was officially established on May 14, 1948.
Crowds gathered in the streets and greeted the birth of their state with traditional dances.
On May 15th, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon and Iraq declared war.
The call for a holy war against the Jews went out from Cairo.
It was clear, literally from day one, that if it were to survive, Israel would have to draw on the immense chutzpah of its people at home and abroad. Trained by the Polish in the 1930s and British intelligence during the Second World War, dedicated Zionists knew that the best. By the 1950s, Israel had established the intelligence agency to end all intelligence agencies and named it the Institute, or in Hebrew, Mossad. Today, Lieutenant Colonel Avner Abraham tells us about 5 of the most daring, impressive, audacious and perilous Mossad operations.
Hi, my name is Avner Abraham and I'm a former Mossad agent.
Argentina 1960. As Israel's neighbors laid siege from all sides, it was vital that the besieged Jewish state set an example for its enemies by rounding up and bringing to justice war criminals.
Operation Finale was the first big Mossad operation.
The most notorious of these was Adolf Eichmann, an unrepentant Nazi who had been allowed to go free at the end of World War II.
Eichmann was a lieutenant colonel, Nazi, and he was the architect of the Holocaust. He was in charge of the schedule. He was in charge of all the trains. He was responsible for the death of 6 million people.
After escaping justice in Europe, Eichmann had moved to South America. By 1960, he was managing a Mercedes car factory in Argentina. But with multilingual Mossad agents from all over the world, Eichmann's days of freedom were numbered.
Mossad agents came from all over the world. They can speak different languages, and for us, languages are like weapons. When he came back from work, 7 Mossad agents with 2 cars, they captured him and they brought him to a safe house.
Once captured, Mossad had to somehow smuggle Eichmann to Israel. The Israeli airline didn't have flights to Argentina, so they made up a cover story that they were considering a new route to Buenos Aires and arranged a special inaugural flight. But there was to be an extra crew member on its return.
The idea was to bring Eichmann dressed like a navigator, but very sick.
Eichmann was drugged, forced into an El Al flight crew uniform and driven to the airport.
They smuggled Eichmann to the plane as a fake navigator.
The capture of Eichmann was conducted on Argentine soil without the consent of the Argentine government. As is often the case, it only became clear after the mission was completed that its means were justified by its ends. One slip, One collateral death, one abusive process, and this triumph of international justice would have been remembered as gross violation of international law. The operation showed why Mossad must remain up to the task of outwitting not just Israel's enemies, but sometimes even Israel's friends. Eichmann stood trial for his war crimes in Jerusalem and became one of just 2 people to be sentenced to death and executed in Israel.
I'm Iraqi Jew. I was born in Israel, but my parents came from Iraq, and the Mossad smuggled them in a special operation called Ezra and Nehemiah operation.
Growing up to join the elite force which had rescued his parents and brought them home to Israel, he recalls that for Mossad, even the capture of a Soviet jet fighter can be a sensitive family matter. In 1966, the Iraqi Air Force acquired a fleet of lethal combat aircraft from the Soviet Union.
MiG-21, the Russian aircraft, no one in the West got any information about this new killing machine.
The Middle East wouldn't be safe until Israel and the USA could get a look at one of these lethal machines, so Mossad hatched a plan to help an Iraqi MiG-21 pilot to defect.
The Mossad knew that there is a pilot in Iraq, that he is a Christian pilot. It's not a secret that the Christian people suffer in the Arab countries.
Captain Munir Redfer was a hero of the Iraqi Air Force, but as a Chaldean Catholic, the 31-year-old flying ace sought a better life outside Iraq. There was just one catch: he would not leave his young family behind.
He decided that he wanted to escape from Iraq with his wife, with his 2 kids.
Mossad instructed Captain Redfer to listen to Israel's Arabic language radio channel and wait for a very specific signal.
You have to listen carefully after 7 a.m. After the news. If you hear this song, you have a green light to take off. And the song is Welcome, Welcome. In Arabic, it's Marhabten, Marhabten.
The song was played, the coast was clear, and Captain Redfer took off.
And he took off and landed in Israel.
But Captain Redfer had entrusted more than his own life to the care of Mossad.
The Mossad smuggled the whole family from Iraq to Europe and from Europe to Israel.
Captain Redfer's MiG-21 was a treasure trove of Cold War engineering expertise. Today it sits on display outside the Israeli Air Force Museum, a relic of dead ideologies and falling regimes. But Mossad never forgot their promise to Captain Redfer's family.
After 2 years, the Mossad gave them a fake identity, and they flew and they got a new life far away from Iraq, far away from Israel. The pilot and his wife passed away, but the 2 kids, until today, we support them.
Operation Diamond became the basis for Steal the Sky, a 1988 thriller whose storyline is not nearly as accurate as the real event. In 1972, the Munich hostage crisis tested Israel's diplomatic nerve to its limits. In the midst of the Summer Olympics, 8 Palestinian terrorists captured Israeli athletes and held them hostage in the middle of the Olympic Village under the glare of the world's television cameras.
They took 11 hostages. They killed 2 of them. And they start to negotiate with the state of Israel.
The guerrillas are demanding the release of 250 Arabs held prisoner in Israel and have set noon as the deadline for their release.
The terrorists belonged to the Black September group
and demanded the release of 250 terrorists and Palestinian activists from Israeli prisons.
And Prime Minister Golda Meir said, we are not going to negotiate with you.
If Israel were to negotiate with terrorists offering a life for a life, no Israeli would be safe at home or abroad. Despite Israel's offers of military assistance, the hostage situation was entrusted to the German police and ended in a bloodbath in which the hostages were killed.
Our worst fears have been realized tonight. They're all gone.
But that wasn't the end of the story.
Golda Meir decided that she's going to send the Mossad agents to kill all the people that were responsible for this terror attack. The special unit Kidon killed the first one in Paris, Hamshari. He was actually the PLO ambassador in Paris. They entered to his apartment and they put a bomb under the telephone. And when he answered the phone, and then they pressed the button and boom.
Israel's refusal to negotiate with terrorists leads to a standoff, which forces Mossad to strike with a level of surgical precision hitherto unimaginable in warfare, while Israel's enemies do everything they can to trip the Israeli state into committing an atrocity in the eyes of the international community.
You are sending agents and they are killing someone in your capital. And in the meantime, you have diplomatic relation between Jerusalem and Paris. This is the reason why in the most of the cases, the State of Israel and Mossad didn't take any responsibility.
Like many Mossad operations, including that which saved Colonel Abraham's own parents, Operation Moses sought to evacuate 8,000 African Jews from war, famine, and persecution. In 1984, a war between Ethiopia and Sudan led to a devastating famine, yet the Ethiopian government refused to let the Jewish population leave because they were useful as pawns in diplomatic negotiations with Israel. A plan was hatched to enable Mossad operatives to enter under fake identities and set up an operations base in Ethiopia.
It was an enemy country and we couldn't enter like Israelis.
Their decoy was a massive hotel.
This hotel was unique. It was a hotel in the desert near the sea. Now think about all the managers are Mossad agents, and in the beginning they didn't have any guests. So Mossad agents came, retired Mossad agents, couples, came for vacation in Sudan as a guest. It was a real hotel, and in the Christmas, all the Israeli agents needed to dance with the guests in the hotel, and they made for them a Christmas party. Think about Jewish people, agents, doing a Christmas party.
Mossad intermingled Ethiopian Jews among the guests and used the hotel to bring them to safety in Israel.
There is a harbor there, and they came with the Israeli Navy, and they took them.
Efforts to rescue Ethiopian Jews continued into the 1990s with the Operation Joshua Airlift of 1991 cramming at least 1,088 Ethiopian Jews onto one single flight, a record for the number of passengers on one flight, which stands to this very day. Following the October 7th attack on Israel last year, Israel once again enters into a game of cat and mouse with the terrorists who threaten Israel's national existence. And once again, Israel's enemies surround themselves with human shields. The leader of the Hamas terrorist organization, Ismail Haniyeh, cowered in the heart of an almost perfect fortress in Tehran, far from war-torn Gaza, under the protection of the Islamic regime in Iran and its military.
It was in the private residency that belonged to the Iranian government, actually the people that guard the president.
But no one who terrorizes Israel is safe. On July 31st, 2024, Haniyeh was killed by a bomb, planted by someone posing as his own bodyguard.
Maybe the Iranian killed him. Okay, maybe the Iranian killed him. I don't know.
Nobody knows who assassinated Haniyeh, but such a clean, deadly surgical strike in a crowded city at the heart of a hostile state calls to mind the same ethos of Mossad's many military and intelligence operations. And this verse from the biblical book of Proverbs, which inspires their motto, by way of deception, thou shalt do war.
I'm Buzz, decentralized finance and AI founder. Imagine this. An AI accuses you of murdering your own kids and publishes that information. Well, that nightmare struck Arv Holman in Norway when ChatGPT cooked up a lie. A hallucination of him drowning his sons and spending 21 years in prison following a conviction. It even blended in real details about his family and hometown. Well, this week, privacy group Noib filed a complaint with Norway's Data Protection Authority and demanded that OpenAI erase the false data and fix the model under EU law. I'm all for AI as a technologist. It's a game changer, has the potential to move humanity forward, but when it hallucinates, lives can be burnt, and that is where we need to protect humanity. Globally, the biggest AI firms are racing to win these AI wars, but privatization and speed should not overlook humanity's benefit. From California to China, these AI companies are scaling and raising private capital fast, but errors like this highlight failing safeguards. This case could force a rethink on AI privacy worldwide, and the next steps might hit us all. This is Buzz, and this is your 69 seconds within 69 minutes.
Silicon Valley has a new challenger, watch out, and it's in Argentina. Cordoba is rising as a global tech hub, fueled by AI, crypto, and a wave of ambitious startups. With top talent, low costs, and a government led by Milei, cutting red tape and pushing innovation, could this be the next big tech powerhouse? The future of Argentina's Silicon Valley inside the boom that's turning heads worldwide. Take a look.
In terms of the technological ecosystem in Argentina, it's pretty strong. So it has been 20 or 30 years of, growing this industry. and we had a lot of support from the government, for example, in Córdoba. Even in the national government, in the past we had, for example, a law, there was a software law, that software companies or tech companies have some tax incentives to grow. So last year has been a little bit good. Of course, cost of living in Argentina has been increasing, so it makes you be a little bit less competitive. The economy, I'm not an expert in economy or politics, but it looks like economy is recovering, of course. But, you know, inflation is stable, you can plan other things, you know, but technology is a kind of bubble and has been several years of good growth. We are a service company. Service companies often are pretty stable, so you can grow with your own, you know, investments. We have a plan for the next 3 or 4 years. We want to double our you know, size and markets. And the markets, for example, we are here in Barcelona. We want to grow our Barcelona office. Córdoba is in the middle of Argentina, surrounded by mountains, surrounded by lakes. It's pretty nice. But we have a lot of an ecosystem that makes, you know, the environment easy or, you know, good for tech companies. For example, we have a lot of universities there, public universities, that we have several, you know, tech careers. We have FAMAF that's has a career for data engineers and machine learning engineers. Yes, it's one of the largest in Argentina. We have UTN, which I studied there, like a public university, study system engineering, and you have a lot of, you know, programmers and software engineers getting graduated every year. So it's good for companies like us to get that engineers and train them. And also there is a good English level in Argentina. So you can work with the US directly and other countries, of course. So in Córdoba, we have good universities. We have been in the last 20 years receiving good companies. The first one that I remember, of course, was Motorola in the early 2000s. Actually, there is one of the guys here that tell the story that Bluetooth was discovered in Córdoba. There is a patent there, which is in the US, of course, but there is a story about the part of the Bluetooth was discovered in Córdoba. As I say, in the past, a lot of incentives from the government for getting tech business. Software law, latest software was one of them. If you were certified in certain quality certification, one of them was the ISO 9001. A lot of companies in Córdoba are certified on that. There was CMMI, which was, you know, from the US Department of Defense. And with all of those US companies coming to Córdoba, it leveled up the level of engineers there. In Argentina, we have several companies that we are proud of, that are examples for us. Like one of them is Mercado Libre, which is like the Amazon for South America. They are huge in Brazil, huge in Argentina. Actually, I order everything for Mercado Libre, and they are great. We have Globant, which is a software company. It's huge. It's one of the models, because we have a similar company. We are ExoMindset. One of the Globant is the model that we want to follow in terms of growth. They are more than 3,000 employees around the world. They have bought a lot of companies for Argentina's entrepreneurs, and they're a public company in the US. Mercado Libre, you have also Despegar, which is a airline, tourists, and you can buy tickets there. So we have several companies that have been put in Argentina in international view, and that's another example for us. No, as I say, you know, we have been growing stable last 20 years, depending on the government. So I don't think so that will impact. And you have a lot of Argentina's companies that work with several countries, so it's larger than only one country. So I have good, you know, vibes about what's going on. Today, Argentina is a good place to outsource and to to think about it, because we have a balance between cost and quality, really good quality with good cost. If you're thinking in the US, we are in the same time zone, pretty similar culture, so it's a good moment for companies in the US, for example, to reach to Argentinian companies. So mindset, 5 years around the market. We do mainly AI and data. Today we are focusing a lot in AI agents. We want to bring the automation for companies. We also do digital products. We have Tupperware as clients, for example. We're bringing e-commerce for them.
Hi, I'm Mary Delgado, and welcome to 69 Seconds. So strap in for a wild ride through the finance markets for the past week, because it's been a circus. And I'm your caffeinated ringmaster. Stocks kicked things off with a faceplant. The S&P 500 dropped 1.8% on Monday, all because of Trump's tariffs. It had Wall Street sweating like a turkey in November. Investors clutching their pearls, wondering if the economy's about to trip over its own shoelaces. The Fed, they just sat there twiddling their thumbs, leaving rates untouched like a kid who won't share the remote. Thanks for the suspense, guys. Meanwhile, gold, dazzling gold, is shredded to a record, because when chaos reigns, everyone wants that sparkly security blanket. It's flexing above 3,000 like it's auditioning for a heist movie. Oil's riding high too, hitting new peaks. Supply worries are the hot gossip now. So stocks are freaking, gold's gleaming, and oil's grinning. Here's hoping we don't all end up bartering with shiny rocks and gasoline by next month. I'm Mary Delgado, and that's your 69 seconds for 69 minutes.
Is this the Google killer? Perplexity AI is rewriting the rules. Real-time search, no bias, supposedly. But as AI takes over search, does it shape your reality or just reflect it? Who holds the keys to knowledge if algorithms decide what's true? When AI anticipates your questions before you ask, are you searching or just being shown? Dr. Dornish sits down with Perplexity's founder to explore how AI will reshape not just search, but reality itself. Here's a sneak peek from our original series, Uncanny Valley, which airs Fridays only on X.
Feels like we're living decades in like span of 2 or 3 years. And I'm not saying this just because everybody else is saying it. That's how it really feels to me. I personally feel like I've lived way longer in the last 2-3 years.
You're actually only 18 years old. So this is just what you look like now. Like, it seems like where the world's going is not answering questions, but doing things. Yeah. Right? Like, it seems like, are we going to see Perplexity? Or, I mean, let's talk more general. Like, people want answers so they can do something with it.
Yeah, exactly. I think about it in 2 ways. One is doing things in the context of an answer. That's the number one low-hanging fruit. So when you're researching what are the best microphones I should buy for sounding really well on a world-class podcast, I'll go and ask this question on Perplexity. It gives me a great answer. It reads the reviews. But what if you get the products also right there in the answer in line with a buy button, and you just click on it and the action is done, and the agent actually takes care of going to the merchant site and like filling up your credit card details. It can generate a new credit card on the fly that's tied to your Perplexity Pro subscription credit card, and then all your shipping address, all of that is like just one-time detail you give, and it remembers that, right? And then once it gets a sense of what you like, it can also like tune the results better to your preferences. You don't have to keep saying it again and again. I want this, I want that. Yeah. So I think that is like already kind of beginning to do things for you. You just don't notice it. The problem is we're not seeing this happen in a general unified way.
I think we are at the point now where we can all admit that mobile was the perfect OS for the internet.
Yeah.
That the desktop was the wrong OS for the internet. I think most people believe that. I don't know. But I think we needed laptops and notebooks and cell phones. That was the right OS. And I feel like if you're going to try to retrofit AI to an old infrastructure and OS, it's always going to be outside the uncanny valley.
Yeah, I agree.
And so who builds that AI native OS? Nobody has the incentive to do it.
So I think we're going to start from these basic steps this year, and eventually get to a point where you feel like Warren Buffett. That's the idea. So there's a joke I made on Twitter a while ago, which is like, what is the Warren Buffett phone? So Warren Buffett famously never used a smartphone. And so like the reason he said is because the two things I do on my phone are messaging people and taking phone calls, and I hardly even do messages. And I don't need a iPhone for that, which has made me think, okay, if you want to live like a billionaire, all you need, your phone should essentially converge to messages and calls. Billionaires just do phone calls because they don't schedule things. Their assistants schedule stuff for them. The assistants put them on the phone. They don't even need to call the person. They don't need to have contacts. Their assistants take care of that. And then like text messages are so easy to respond to, right?
The Warren Buffett phone feels like utopia because I feel like I spend way too much time on my phone.
So I feel like this is the ultimate future of AI. Like AI should deprecate the front end of the phone. Like apps will still be there, but they're all going to feel like hidden tabs on the browser. They're all hidden apps. Uber, DoorDash, and all that, they'll have some front end too that comes part of your assistant. But like, once the car is ready waiting, like you get a call and the assistant will tell you move left, right, it'll whatever, right? And you just go there.
Everyone's like, the world's going to end, AGI is going to come, you're going to become useless. And I feel like I haven't noted that with you. Like you haven't, I don't think you buy into that at all.
No, I don't buy into that. I mean, we have to adapt. It's very obvious. And I think we are adapting. If hundreds of millions of people are using these AIs on a weekly basis, then we are adapting. I don't think AGI is going to come for us. I think it's just going to feel like a paradigm shift that, except the only change is from the internet and the mobile is happening way faster. So the speed is higher, but the risk is not like higher. The risks that existed with the internet were like crazy. Spams and child porn and like scams and like blackmailing. We came through all of that shit. So we'll be fine.
maybe not completely unscathed. We're still some pains, but yeah, like overall. But like are deepfakes gonna fuck shit up? Sure. Are we gonna struggle with?
But that's why there are things like verified identities, like look. A lot of people made fun for Elon for selling blue marks, and so someone could just have a new Twitter account with a blue mark and a fake handle, but like they can change their name to Elon Musk and make a code, and no one, sure, maybe for the first few impressions people are going to get fooled, but then after that they're going to be like, oh, this is fake, the real Elon Musk has this Twitter ID, and then there's going to be algorithms that detect such activity and then shadow ban or like ban these accounts. You can only build the defenses when the attacks happen sometimes, and as long as they're not fatal, we should be able to fix a lot of these things. One thing I tell a lot of people who come and ask me which businesses are worth investing in now if AI keeps taking off, is like social, because social, I think this real human-to-human connection is going to become even more important in a world where AIs are going to be able to pretend to be humans, and so that's why like I think. X, like people will still spend time on X. People will still watch like funny videos.
I think people will spend more time on X, actually.
Exactly. People
will have more time to spend.
Exactly. Yeah, they'll have more time to spend because work got easier.
Now it's time for my take on something that really got X talking this week. Could the mainstream media potentially, and I don't want to put them out here, maybe dig a little deeper into the sources they quote verbatim? Blindly republishing any information that you haven't verified is unethical and lazy. But when that information comes directly from terrorists, well, it's downright dangerous. War resumed in the Middle East this week, and yes, people will die. Plenty of terrorists, hopefully, and good riddance, but also women and children. And that is utterly tragic. But it happens. Particularly when you are dealing with Hamas, who either hide in tunnels or behind families. So when these same people who filmed themselves slaughtering over 1,200 innocent people on October 7, while simultaneously taking hostages, including 2 babies they then killed, when they release numbers of those killed and the demographic, before it would be humanly possible to know, then maybe exercise a little skepticism. I don't want to throw you here. All I'm saying is maybe, just maybe, the same group of savages who burnt 3 children alive in a room and laughed don't necessarily value nor tell the truth. More media outlets than I could count this week reported as fact numbers of those killed directly from Hamas. Some even repeating again as fact that it was, and I quote, mostly women and children. Urban warfare expert John Spencer with the following take. And poof, international media returns to reporting civilian casualty numbers provided by the Hamas Gaza Health Ministry, who can determine casualty numbers in minutes and hours with no caveats of sources, descriptions of methods of counting, distinction of combatant versus non-combatant, or context of cause of death, etc., etc. Now, Reuters, whose job it is, by the way, to feed thousands of media outlets and millions of consumers around the world their information, a trusted source apparently, sent this alert. Israeli strikes kill 326 in Gaza, collapsing ceasefire with Hamas. Not even a caveat, like according to Hamas in this alert. And collapsing the ceasefire? That was collapsed by the terrorists when, and I quote, acting US Ambassador to the United Nations, Dorothy Shea, says, the brutal terrorist organisation refused every proposal and deadline they've been presented with over the past weeks. The blame for the resumption of hostilities lies solely with Hamas. Now, I myself would go further. The blame for this entire sorry saga lies solely with Hamas. The blame for every single child killed in Gaza lies solely with Hamas. Can we all please stop pretending like there are two legitimate sides in this war who are maybe having a fight or a dispute over land? That is not the case. Hamas are sadistic murderers who hand their own people a death sentence through their very existence. If those who purport to care about children dying in Gaza, and that should be every single human being, could wake up and realise who their real enemy is, then that would go a long way towards saving them. The same day the initial ceasefire was reached, Hamas leadership went on global television and promised to repeat the atrocities of October 7 at the first chance they got. And the Ceasefire Now Brigade, well, they were silent. Their children will continue to tragically die as long as they value killing Israeli Jews more than the lives of their own loved ones. There are still 59 hostages in Gaza. They aren't just a number, not a fake one either. They are real people with mothers and fathers and children who haven't breathed fully since their capture. And Hamas are refusing to engage. This isn't rocket science. Now, no one expects the media to be fair or to be thorough or accurate. Most of us have completely given up on most of you by now. But at the very least, please, when terrorists are your main source, exercise just a little bit of caution, a lot if you can possibly muster it, and stop doing their dirty work for them. It only hurts those children you pretend to care about, and a hell of a lot of other people too. That's it for 69X Minutes, where the real stories always get told. I'm Erin Molan. Thank you so much for joining us. No spin, no censorship, just the truth. Stay on X. You know that's where it's at. See you next time.